thank you so much for joining, for everyone around this great country of us, of ours, for joining us this afternoon. So my name is Sofia Protzinus, and together here with my colleague at the Cushing Whitney Medical Library, Rolando Garcia-Millian, as well as Molly Knapp and Rana Morris and Kate Majewski at the National Library of Medicine. We welcome you all to this series of talks dedicated to explore the evolution of bioinformatics services in libraries. So the idea to organize this series arose from the celebration of the 10th year anniversary of the Bioinformatics Support Hub here at the Medical Library, which led us to ponder over the collective past, present, and future of the bioinformatics services in libraries. And to share just a little bit of our story, the Bioinformatics Support Hub was launched in 2014 by my colleague Rolando Garcia-Millian, focusing on the retrieval of molecular information from knowledge databases. And between 2015 and 2017, the service bolstered its collection development, specifically through the licensing of software designed to enhance data processing and analytic support. The years of 2018 to 2021 marked a period of scaling, characterized by the introduction of our peer-to-peer teaching program, the establishment of the Symbonus Fellowship, and the creation of a new permanent position. That is exactly when I was hired. And so I'm dedicated to education of command line tools. And then in 2022 to the present day, our efforts have been directed towards establishing and strengthening collaborations with various institutional departments and core facilities, further solidifying the service's integral role within the academic and the research community. Slides are not transition. Okay. So because it is relevant for today's session, I would like to take a minute to be more specific on how the Bioinformatics Support Hub has been enhancing its connection with the cores here at Yale. So with the Neuroproteomics Center, which is a core here, we are included in a grant that allows us to provide downstream analysis to their support to their constituents. And Rolando gives presentations of those analyses and services. With the Center for Research Computing, we give collaborative instruction, and we suggest installation of tools we deem useful to the community. With the CAC Mass Spectrometry and Proteomics Center, we provide downstream analysis too, and also contribute to workflow improvement. And finally, to the Yale Center for Genomic Analysis, we connect for consultations and organize collaborative instruction and work to increase the access and awareness for their resources, such as analytic pipelines. So having said that, and back to why we are here, it was based on this reflection process that we decided to reach out to our colleagues at the National Library of Medicine and organize these 7 round tables, basically around bioinformatics services in libraries. And we are very excited for today's session, dedicated to learn how can we strengthen collaborations between library and university cores dedicated to bioinformatics service. And to help us with that, we invited Marci Brandenburg from the University of Michigan and Fred LaPolla from the New York University, which each will have 20 minutes to present, after which we'll have time for questions, and I hope we have many. I will introduce our first speaker, Marci Brandenburg, who has a Master of Science in Biology from Ohio University and a Master of Science in Information from the University of Michigan. She is the bioinformaticianist at the University of Michigan's Taubman Health Science Library, where she works closely with the Bioinformatics Core and Department for Computational Medicine of Computational Medicine and Bioinformatics. So thank you so much, Marci, and please take the virtual stage.
Thank you. Let me just take a moment to share my slides. Situated. Okay, you should be seeing my slides at this point, hopefully. All right, so thank you for the introduction and for inviting me here today. So as mentioned, I am Marci Brandenburg, bioinformationist with the University of Michigan Taubman Health Sciences Library. I've been in this position for approximately 14 years. I do have a background in biology and also in library and information services, but my biology focus was more in ecology and wildlife biology as opposed to bioinformatics. In my current job, I work very closely with the University of Michigan's Bioinformatics Core, which you will learn more about today, and also the University of Michigan's Department of Computational Medicine and Bioinformatics. I would like to start by giving a little background on my institution and the groups I will be focusing on today. The University of Michigan was founded in 1817. It consists of 3 campuses, with the largest being in Ann Arbor, Michigan. It is a large public institution. It had over $1 billion in federally funded research and $1.86 billion research volume in fiscal year 2023. It is made up of 19 schools and colleges and currently has over 50,000 students, more than 8,000 faculty, and over 18,000 staff. And that does not include the hospital, which actually has more than 20,000 additional staff. So it is a large institution. As previously noted, I am the bioinformationist in the Taubman Health Sciences Library, which is one of many libraries in the wider University of Michigan library system. We focus on Michigan medicine, which includes the hospital. We also focus on the medical school, College of Pharmacy, and the schools of nursing, dentistry, kinesiology, and public health. Although we have a print collection, there are actually no print books or journals located on site. And we currently have 18 informationists who offer a wide range of education and research services, including systematic reviews, data visualization, data management, research impact, citation management, and much more. However, I am the only informationist with a focus on bioinformatics. As will be discussed during this presentation, I work very closely with the University of Michigan Medical School's Bioinformatics Core Facility, which is one of 11 biomedical research core facilities under the Office of Research. The Bioinformatics Core helps biologists identify and interpret patterns in DNA, RNA, and proteins. It is a 4-fee core that does approximately 100 projects per year across a wide range of analyses, model systems, and experimental designs. Including me, this core is made up of a team of 8 analysts, software engineers, and project managers, and the group is remote first and distributed currently across 3 states and 2 countries. First, I will give a little history of the Bioinformatics Core and my relationship with it before diving deeper into my current role with the group. The Bioinformatics Core formed in 2012. Due to pre-existing collaborations I had with the individuals managing this new core, I was included as part of the core from the start, but my role has changed over time. So in the early days, I did a lot of outreach, such as staffing vendor-type tables at several on-campus events. This is something I still help with today. Early on, I helped facilitate a couple of training sessions, but training was low priority during these early days when the core was just starting up. It wasn't until the pandemic that training took on higher priority, and I will talk more about this in a later slide. Initially, I also did some resource management and software licensing for several site licenses that were managed by the Bioinformatics core. Examples of these software tools are Genomatics and Metacore. This is no longer a role I play, as the tools used by the Bioinformatics core have changed over time to mostly free resources or non-site licensed resources. And IT groups on campus have taken over the few site licenses the university has maintained for bioinformatics software. During this early period, I usually spent 1 day a week in the core's official suite, in the core's office suite, so that I could be visible and available to the team. My role with the Bioinformatics core underwent a significant transformation in 2015, when the core's project manager at the time was temporarily unavailable, and the director thought outside of the box and asked me to fill the role of project manager. This proved to be a good fit for me, and circumstances changed so that I took on this role more permanently. This did require an increase in my percent effort, as I had been working 20% for the core, and when I started doing project management, it increased to 40%. At this time, I started spending 2 days a week in the core's office suite to be more available and hold meetings. However, during the pandemic shutdown, the team switched to remote first, which has persisted and is the current practice of the core today. So all meetings are held via Zoom. As project manager, I'm managing a number of small projects across approximately 6 analysts, as opposed to managing 1 or 2 large projects. Today, I'm going to mention just a few of the things that I do in my role as project manager. I thought it would be helpful to provide a simplified, high-level version of our workflow, starting with what happens when a new project comes to the core. So the core offers initial free consultations up to 1 hour. There are several ways in which the core may receive a new request. This could come in via a group email address. An email might be sent directly to an analyst. There's a general website form that might get filled out. There's also a bioinformatics course specific consultation request form that might be filled out. So once a researcher's request is received through one of these methods, I ask 1 or 2 analysts to meet with the researcher. Assigning projects to specific analysts is based on both the type of project and each analyst's current project load. This can be a very challenging aspect of the role. I aim to balance project load across analysts, but projects often span a number of weeks and are dependent on researcher input, so it's really hard to know exactly when current projects will be completed. I know some libraries offering systematic review services struggle with similar issues in determining how to divide up requests amongst their librarians, all of whom are already overwhelmed with existing projects. So I imagine some of you understand this challenge well. After the initial consultation, the next step is for me to add the project to our project management software system, and for the analyst to write a project plan that outlines the scientific context, analysis approach, and deliverables. This project plan gets reviewed by me before it gets sent to the customer for approval. We give cost estimate ranges for each project based on the number of hours we anticipate the project taking. These are determined by getting estimates from 1 or often 2 analysts, in addition to my gathering and using information on how much time we spent previously on similar projects. Based on all of this information, I determine the final range to be provided to the customer. The range is just an estimate, as when it comes to bioinformatics analysis, it can be very difficult to predict how long a project will take before getting one's hands dirty with the data. After the customer approves the project plan, the next step is for the analyst to execute the analysis. Although most customer communications are done directly by the analysts, I am included on all messages to keep my finger on the pulse of each project. This also allows me to help ensure that we are providing timely and important communications to customers as we aim to communicate with customers at least once a week. I hold weekly one-on-one meetings with each analyst to discuss the progress of each of their projects. During these meetings, the analysts give me updates on each project. We discuss upcoming projects, timelines, and priorities. We talk about communications that are needed, upcoming or recently completed consultations, workload balance, and more. I'm constantly trying to improve the core's processes to better serve its customers while simultaneously collecting valuable information and reducing burden on each analyst. You may be wondering, why have a librarian as the project manager for a core facility? Well, I think that librarians can make good project managers, as we're often organized and detail-oriented. At least that is true about this librarian. Because core facilities provide for-fee services, they need to be customer service oriented, which is a model that librarians are accustomed to from helping users find, understand, and access desired information. Librarians care about reproducibility, which is important in a bioinformatics core facility, where customers may come back several years later and ask for follow-up work and/or methods for their previous analysis. As a result, it is important to document which version of various tools were used and what parameters were changed, just like a librarian might document these details for a literature search. As a librarian with a focus on helping bioinformatics researchers on campus, the role of project manager for a bioinformatics core has surrounded me with information about bioinformatics, therefore significantly increasing my knowledge of the field. It has also helped me stay on top of new developments as they are discussed and planned for within the core, better positioning me to help researchers that use the core and library services. Another collaboration that has developed with the Bioinformatics core is around workshops. Over the last few years, workshops have become a higher priority for the Bioinformatics core. I am part of a small working group within the core that meets weekly to plan and facilitate these sessions. These workshops are all remote using Zoom and Slack, and so far each has consisted of 3 consecutive half days. The library is a co-sponsor of these workshops to account for my additional time that is needed to help with them. The core currently has 4 different workshops. We offer computational foundations, which meets the prerequisite for the other workshops and covers the basics of using Bash command line and R. If you are familiar with software carpentry and their lesson plans, there are similarities, but our content is tailored to ensure attendees learn the commands necessary for our other workshops. We offer RNA-seq Demystified, which covers bulk RNA-seq analysis. There's Introduction to Single-Cell Analysis, which, as the name implies, focuses on single-cell RNA-seq analysis. And we offer Computational Reproducibility at UM, which is the only workshop specific to the University of Michigan environment and covers using the institutional computing cluster, workflow automation, and containerization. Other than the last workshop, these are all open to anyone in the world. There is a current cost of $390 per seat for each workshop, except Computational Foundations, which is technically free, but is often paired with RNA-seq Demystified, and priority is given to those who register for the RNA-seq Demystified workshop. You may be wondering what my actual role is for these workshops. Along with the director of the Bioinformatics Core, I handle a lot of the administrative aspects, including reviewing content on some lesson plan pages, reviewing content in pre- and post-workshop surveys, and on the Eventbrite pages, which we use for registration. I help manage registration and also billing, much of which is done in separate platforms. I answer questions from interested learners. In some scenarios, I have actually been a guinea pig for things such as setup instructions, since I represent the naive learner. Then, during live sessions, I play the role of co-host. For some workshops, I co-present logistical information, such as how we will be using Zoom reactions and breakout rooms. I introduce a breakout room exercise and summarize other communication patterns that will be used throughout the workshop. However, I am not one of the individuals presenting the primary content for the workshops, as most of that is done by core analysts. Much of my effort is really behind the scenes, including managing breakout rooms, keeping an eye on Slack to identify unanswered questions, making sure we're recording when appropriate, running a timer for exercises, and importantly, tracking the pacing of the workshop to identify if and when we need to make on-the-fly adjustments, which we often do. I don't have a programming background, nor do I use these tools in my day-to-day, but I have learned so much by sitting through these workshops. So over time, on occasion, I've even tried to help a learner troubleshoot an issue. I just covered several ways in which I collaborate with a core facility. And now I want to spend the next few slides talking about why I collaborate with a core facility. What are the advantages of such a collaboration between the library and the bioinformatics core? This relationship makes me, the bioinformationist, act as a hub that connects researchers with core analysts, bioinformatics resources, the library, and other core facilities. As project manager, I'm embedded and an integral member of the bioinformatics core. This has created an environment where analysts are comfortable asking me information-related questions, such as, do we have access to a specific article? Or should I use SciENCV when creating a biosketch? And this has expanded beyond the bioinformatics core to members of other cores and the Biomedical Research Core Facilities Administration, who also come to me with information-related questions. I believe the library's visibility has increased within all of the biomedical research core facilities as a result of the role I play with the bioinformatics core. This relationship has also increased visibility for the library within the research community as a co-sponsor of the bioinformatics core workshops. In addition, there have been core customers that have benefited from library services. Core analysts have made referrals to me and the library. For example, via the library's data visualization services, I provide instruction on the Cytoscape network visualization software to core customers. One other significant advantage of this collaboration has been the education that I have received by being embedded in the bioinformatics core. My knowledge and understanding of bioinformatics increased substantially when I took on the role of project manager. Being part of numerous internal conversations between analysts and also with our sequencing core has helped me stay up on the latest developments, tools, and technologies in the field. I just want to end with this statement that was included on a poster presented at the 2017 Great Lakes Bioinformatics Conference, as I feel like it nicely summarizes the value and significance of the collaboration discussed today. I will quickly read the statement. It says, serving as both information scientist and biologist, the bioinformationist is a boundary-spanning member of the core and the library. With expertise in multidisciplinary biomedical research and computational biology, project management, and the range of bioinformatics resources and services available through the library, the bioinformationist supports bioinformatics research at many levels, creating synergy between the members of the UM community interested in bioinformatics. I would like to thank the organizing team for inviting me to present today and thank all of you for listening to my story.
Thank you so much, Marci. So many questions I have for you, but in a little while. So now I will introduce Fred LaPolla from New York University. Fred is the head for the New York University Health Science Library's data services team and liaison to the departments of general internal medicine and clinical innovation and radiology. He's passionate about professional education and finding ways to facilitate learning around data collection, management, visualization, and analysis. Thank you so much, Fred.
All right, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. So yeah, I'll be here to talk to you a bit about NYU Langone Health's, or the Health Sciences Library at NYU Langone Health's approach to how we've sort of provided support to bioinformatics, which I think provides a nice counterpart to Marci's presentation, because I think, have a very different sort of model. Also want to mention, in addition to serving as our head of data services, I do some consulting with the NNLM's National Center for Data Services here, which is also another place you all can go for learning about various topics. The NCDS provides trainings on a regular basis, as well as self-paced learning that you may be interested in. It's really important as I go in today just to shout out the rest of my team. Nicole Contaxis, Michelle Yee, Genevieve Milliken, Lloyd Pan, Umea Ermi, Rebecca Kaplan, and Elisa Circus. Though I guess Elisa's more like sort of the emeritus head of, not that she's retired or anything, but she was the head of data services and has now moved up to a vice director role. So maybe emeritus is the wrong term. But in any event, the things I'm talking about today, some of them are things that I personally have been involved with, others very much, especially around our involvement with the course. Really want to give credit to Nicole, or Ms. Contaxis, for doing great work in terms of forming a lot of those interpersonal connections. And a lot of the work we've done, actually, in contrast to what Marci was describing in terms of a sort of formalized role with the course, a lot of our work has been more informal, as well as more around the education side of things. So today I'm going to talk a bit about what our, overall approach has been in terms of driving these sorts of connections. And then I'll give you a bit of our team's history. And I'm hoping in providing that, it can maybe provide some ideas or things to think about in terms of ways that one might form these connections. Because I do think that in our case, a lot of the connections, Marci, you mentioned having these interpersonal connections, and I think that really resonated. Interpersonal connections with other departments really do tend to lead to these relationships. But at the same time, a lot of it has, and at the same time, a lot of this really has come about kind of organically because, opportunities have arisen and presented themselves on the basis of those connections. So there's a few different hallmarks of our approach that I want to just sort of highlight at the top before I sort of talk a bit about the historical connections. So the first thing I'll note is our team. We've been very fortunate in terms of the support we've gotten from our leadership here at the Health Sciences Library, in terms of a lot of willingness to try out different modes of service. I think it's also important to note, none of us, myself included, are bioinformaticians by training. I do not have a background in biology. I have my master's of library science from Queens College is sort of the all-purpose library degree. As a younger person, I've worked briefly as a clinical research assistant, sort of getting my foot into the biomedical life sciences universe, but definitely that was not at all bioinformatics. That was very, social science, at least for me. It was, working with people. And I think that would be consistent. We do have some people with more of a clinical research background, but that's all just to say that over the years, we've tried out a lot of different areas to try to gain, footholds in different ways, see what works and what doesn't. And so we've been really we've really benefited from our leadership providing that kind of space and that openness to, try things. Kind of relating to that, we've really allowed people to, in our role as faculty here at the Health Sciences Library, really allowed people to play to their strengths. I mean, partially this is just another consequence or outcome of that faculty role where everyone's kind of expected to find their own niche, find their own foothold, really explore their interests. But it also relates to this, openness on the part of the leadership and the department as a whole to let people try out different things. And so some individuals on our team, thinking more along the lines I mentioned, Ms. Contaxis, may favor more like systematic level thinking, like high level, like kind of policy type interests. Others, such as myself, I really have much more of an interest in education and learning and teaching and working with students, and however they may be defined. And so I think all of these different approaches have really allowed us to take advantage of opportunities when they've arisen, as well as, again, to Marci's point earlier, form these kind of interpersonal connections that can really help further both the library and our individual professional goals down the road. A related element to this has been openness to opportunities when they arise. So I'll talk a bit more about this in a second. But I mean, historically, our involvement with bioinformatics, there's kind of two main domains. One is providing some degree of support in terms of the goals of the research cores here, which are organized under a group called DART, the Division of Advanced Research Technologies. And then another area is in our education program, the Vilcek Institute here for biomedical and life sciences, which is part of the Grossman School of Medicine here. And basically, amongst other things, that includes our bioinformatics education programs. And so I'll mention in a moment, but we got involved in teaching with Vilcek primarily due to teaching sort of standalone R programming courses through the library, your kind of standard library educational workshop, open to all comers. And when they saw, or when they had a need for additional instruction, they invite us in to provide that instruction. And so that's led to sort of a snowballing effect as we've gone. And that really came about due to that being open to opportunities, open to the conversations as we've grown. On the flip side, we also definitely do have very strongly goal-driven. I know this is sort of in tension with the idea of, being organic, growing, and based on, when the opportunities arise. But there's also definitely been a stress on sort of being goal-driven. So, for example, we have individuals very interested in data management and sharing policy, and that's really allowed those individuals to gain input in discussing and kind of being in the room in the policy discussions around those sorts of topics. And again, those have then led to further deepening of ties to individuals within our cores and then as well within our MCIT. So an example of how that's led to new opportunities is both the cores and our MCIT are very interested in the adoption of, for example, or the more widespread use of electronic lab notebooks. So the Med Center has an account with a specific ELN called Benchling, but basically they want to promote this more and get more people trained up. And so we've been talking with them about ways we might kind of help drive that forward. So again, deepening those ties to the cores, deepening those ties to MCIT in this case, deepening those ties to our education mission. So partially comes about due to these goals of, promoting, for example, data management and sharing that form these connections, and then it sort of snowballs from there. So I'm going to give kind of a background of our Health Sciences Libraries Data Services team, because I do think it's interesting. It's getting cut off in a weird way. Oh, I know what's going on. Oh, well, that's an issue on my slide. Don't worry about that. Just noting that the little call out is covering the I. So historically, our data services team here was formed as sort of an independent unit, or not really independent, but as a unit within our health sciences library back in 2016. Prior to that, my colleagues, Dr. Elisa Serkis and Kevin Reed, who's since gone on to University of, I believe, Saskatoon, they really established the foothold in terms of providing support, establishing resources like the NYU Data Catalog, establishing, creating some asynchronous materials, as well as exploring what the researchers needed and working with researchers on some of the NIH informationist grants. I mentioned, so then we were formally sort of created as a unit within the library or a team within the library. And we had different areas of focus. And I think it's fair to say none of us kind of knew at the outset what it would look like. You know, would it be providing infrastructure support? Would it be providing education support? I know for myself, I was very interested and gained a lot of satisfaction more from the education side. So sort of devoted some time there. And so this was sort of the first area in which we had this increased kind of more or less organic connection to our Vilcek Institute of Graduate Biomedical Sciences. Basically, they knew we were teaching research data management courses, and they felt it was very important for our PhD students in particular to get this access, since a lot of it can kind of be, you know, might fall under like the soft skills or not formally included in their instruction program. And they were it's been, of course, a widespread issue of concern, you know, poor data management leading to issues around reproducibility. And so they really felt it should be required, especially because in our case, non-required courses, especially a non-required course of that nature, would be less, it'd be hard, it'd be a tough sell to get people engaged. So we were fortunate in that we had we formed that relationship, and they had a lot of support and concern there around this specific topic. Eventually, over time, this evolved to become our rigor and reproducibility class. And so that has been a beneficial element of this teaching. I know 2018 isn't listed. It was kind of, you know, continuation year. So that's why that's left off. We also, that same year in 2019, so Nicole Contaxis, who I mentioned earlier, our head of data discovery and curation, began a lot of increased outreach with our legal counsel and MCIT departments, partially to provide training around topics like data sharing, and then increasingly to provide library expertise, kind of a non-MCIT perspective around data sharing and research data management from an institutional standpoint. So being able to provide that interest and expertise in policy and kind of that systems level thinking, bringing that, and that's led to, again, increased connections with both with MCIT and with our legal counsel. That's then helped have librarians who, of course, as you can imagine, have much more of a very different perspective, perhaps, than maybe our IT at certain times, into these discussions around, you know, data sharing and data reuse. So providing that broader context, as well as often having our ears maybe a little bit more to the ground around what are the NLM policies that are, you know, coming out or have, you know, in the past 2 or so years come out relating to data sharing and data management. So on the strength of the rigor and reproducibility class, I mentioned this earlier, but we were invited to teach our programming to bioinformatics master's students, as well as biomedical and life science PhD students, which are just basically 2 different sections of more or less the same material. But again, this was another area where these sort of, I mean, I guess by this point it was relatively formal that we had that teaching relationship in terms of the rigor and reproducibility class that I mentioned. But we were able to, because we were teaching just through the library, our programming, able to offer that to a broader community. And this was kind of something that at the time, really, I mean, stretching back, you know, into the previous several years, there had been a lot of discussion. You may recall, or if you don't recall, at the time in the, you know, 2015, 16, 17, there was a lot of discussion around data librarians in particular providing training in programming languages like R, like Python. And so I personally had no prior to 2015 experience doing R programming, and just decided to learn what it was about, see how it could be used in my own work. And that led to, you know, teaching opportunities that have then sort of snowballed again. I keep using the word snowballed, but, you know, grown over time. So then going forward again, jumping forward, of course, this is sort of eliding the huge social shifts in terms of, you know, the COVID epidemic. Though in terms of our involvement, while we did shift a lot to, online-based teaching and now are shifting back, into offices more, from the standpoint of this talk, it's not necessarily particularly germane. So acknowledging, but not really, didn't really, I think, factor hugely into this topic. Again, my colleague, Ms. Contaxis, as well as our current metadata librarian, Michelle Yee, work to create asynchronous trainings that are focused in our institutional learning management system called Focus. And then similarly on the strength of the previous training, again, seeing another need as coding instructors had left Vilcek, my colleague Genevieve Milliken was also brought in to teach Python, again, to those same bioinformatics students. So continuously providing, sort of leveraging those opportunities to increase kind of communication with our bioinformatics, in this case, bioinformatics education program, but of course, which includes many bioinformaticist researchers, bioinformatician researchers. And so this, again, has further led to further integration into MCIT, into compliance, providing this, again, this perspective. So I kind of mentioned this without needing the slide a moment ago. Yeah, and so increasingly, while not necessarily specific to bioinformatics as a topic, we've also been able to leverage this to kind of jump into these AI training discussions and provision of AI training. So that's not to say it's sort of like maybe a glossy approach or glossy view. I do really want to emphasize the degree to which this was, a 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards, 2 steps backwards, 1 step forward type, evolution over time. And so really we've tried different things. I mentioned this at the top, that we've had the benefit of our leadership being open to trying out different approaches. And, of course, that also, acknowledging there's an element as well that we have the benefit of being a relatively large, health sciences library that people sometimes feel they have the time or had the time to try different approaches, even if it was, somewhat of some degree of risk. So things that were tried in the past, providing infrastructural support to creating a lab organization tool where individuals could kind of record essentially metadata about their research. But we found it required too much buy-in from members of labs. I think it was kind of an idea ahead of its time, especially as there's, more of a shift to lab notebooks now. We also considered things like boot camp style. So sort of on the one hand, infrastructure, on the other hand, education. We tried boot camp style intensive day-long classes on topics like research data management and reproducibility. But frankly, it just required too much time and energy of library staff and faculty to be kind of a sustainable model for us. It was, required full days that, then it would be hard to come by, and just did not feel like a meaningful way to approach the work. Similarly, we did try offering standalone reproducibility workshops kind of to all comers, but we found that there was a lack of student interest, kind of didn't, there's that question of what's it doing for the learner. We tried offering data visualization consults. Again, it was hard to provide meaningful input beyond just sort of, superficial level best practices. So it didn't really pan out as a useful, topic. And then I don't know, I've really written this under idea, but we definitely have had, challenges as time has passed with this approach, where there's sustainability issues on our faculty's time. And we have had to adjust how we've offered services, be they, on request type support versus specific class type support, because again, it could be a challenge to meet the needs over time. So this has created a lot of partnerships through this evolution. So I've mentioned Research and Medical Center IT, definitely a huge one, where colleagues of ours attend regular meetings, talk about data governance with those individuals. I've also mentioned our graduate program being that Vilcek program, which has a very large bioinformatics program. And so gaining those insights and helping to prepare our students, so then when they go to their more bioinformatics specific focused coursework, they can achieve success in their programs and have the skills that are needed. This has also led to growth of connections with our Clinical Translational Science Institute, so working with those researchers there. our Department of Population Health and our Neuroscience Institute. And again, as I mentioned before, our research cores providing support around bioinformatics, microscopy, as well as clinical trial management, among others. So again, it's been very beneficial. In terms of our library's benefit, this has really helped us to further our reputation within our institution, particularly around education, workplace training, and expert insight into the policies, especially as new policies have come out. The library has been a trusted partnership there. And so, yeah, it's really helped in terms of achieving the overall institutional goals. So aside from, benefiting our personal careers, it's really helped to further those goals of providing excellence in care and teaching and discovery by, again, making sure that researchers are working, within compliance, as well as aware of the latest policies, aware of the latest tools, and then working with our education departments and our research departments to, again, make sure that people are aware of tools and have the skills they need to succeed. To our institution. So it's definitely helped our institution as a whole be better situated. So things like compliance, so fulfilling, for example, the data management and sharing policy that came out in 2023. And ultimately, this has, will lead to better outcomes for discovery, for research, as well as benefiting our students who gain from these features or these experiences. So, of course, none of us can say what the future holds. It's a big, plentifully chaotic, but I do really feel that in terms of areas that we're excited about, my colleague, Ms. Contaxis, working with our MCIT or research IT in particular, talking about creating machine actionable data management plans. We're continuing to explore new domains such as generative AI. We are working increasingly with providing expertise around metadata to provide support for data sharing discovery. I mentioned this earlier, but an increased focus in particular with our cores to provide training and support around electronic lab notebooks. And then, of course, another area that we're very interested in is just sort of de-siloing even within the library, so others can sort of leverage skill sets and, refer users to the most helpful person. So just want to really leave you with the idea that being open to opportunities and then playing to our individual librarians' strengths has really helped us form these partnerships organically and led to increased opportunities over time. So I want to thank you so much for your time, as well as thank you for inviting me to the panel today. And now I think we can open it up to questions. Oops.
Thank you so much.
Awesome presentation, Fred and Marci. Thank you again. I think we have quite a few questions, right, Kate?
We have at least a couple, and I bet there's going to be some coming in. So let's start with the first one from Marci. Gary's asking, what is the purpose of charging? Is it to cover salary, limit the number of projects coming in, ensure buy-in from the client, provide funds for staff to professional development? Listen.
Yeah, so the Medical Schools Office of Research, which is sort of the core facilities are underneath that, these particular core facilities are underneath that, they subsidize the core facilities only to a certain extent. So the rest of the cost of running any of these core facilities has to be brought in through recharge, basically. And so for the bioinformatics core, I think the largest expense is the salaries, as opposed to our microscopy core or our sequencing core, which have very, very expensive equipment. But so it is to cover basically all expenses related to running that core. And so that is the reason for charging. That's just the way they have sort of set up these core facilities at the institution. But again, the institution is only subsidizing a certain amount of money and the rest has to be brought in by charging for the actual work that is done.
Thank you. And actually, it looks like Ibu's question was very similar. I wonder if there's any other aspects of Ibu's question that you did not answer. Let's see.
Yeah.
While you're reading through the questions, I do want to just note that that is a fee-based model is also how our cores support their work. So just consistent as well here as well. So that's separate from the library services.
Yeah, I think that is a pretty standard service model for core facilities, and some institutions or some cores, they actually have to be self-sufficient. So the institution may not subsidize anything. I think that's sort of hard with the bioinformatics core because you're not it's a little bit different. The budgeting is a little bit different. You can only do so many analyses depending on how many people you have versus like a microscopy core where it's just an hourly rate and it just, can be that equipment maybe could be used 24 hours a day or something. But that is sort of, I think, a typical a model, but how much they have to bring in and sort of what those rates are and everything is going to vary core to core probably or institution to institution.
I guess Ibu is trying to, maybe, I don't know if either of you know what's the breakdown of funding from different sources. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Kate, you want to address Elliot?
Okay. So let's go to this question. Maybe from Molly or maybe it's through Molly. How popular are your workshops with the outside community? How many people pay for them?
Yeah, it's a great question. So far, majority of the attendees have been within the University of Michigan because that's where we do all of our promotion and that's sort of our target audience. We have had a handful of people from other institutions. Like I feel like we've had some from Cleveland Clinic. We've also had some from around the world. We've had people from Europe and Costa Rica attend our workshops. But it's like 98%, I feel like University of Michigan right now. But again, that's really just because that's who we are promoting it and pushing it to. The people outside of University of Michigan, I don't actually know how they're finding out about. Some, I think, are collaborators. Others, we do have it up on Eventbrite. So I think some people stumble upon it there. But majority have been internal, but it is the same fee right now with your internal or external. So we are more than happy to have people outside of U of M attending, but yeah, most have been within the institution.
Fred, did you also offer workshops that are available publicly?
Basically, no. We do require people to log in with either an NYU Langone or a regular NYU account. And that's kind of mostly just from a like a user security maybe standpoint, just that we kind of didn't. The long and the short of it is there was a time when we didn't, and we kind of noticed, especially with COVID, we'd get like trying to think of the polite way, like random people who then would ask questions, and it kind of gave us a bad vibe. And so we're just like, let's just lock this down. Because yeah, it definitely seemed like there were I don't know if interlopers is the right word, but yeah, it was just we decided to lock it down kind of for everyone's better experience.
Thanks.
Yeah, that makes me wonder if I may just introduce a small question in the middle. For you, Marci, if you get so many people or there is so much interest even from outside, does that affect the logistics of organizing, right? You need to be like really well staffed just to manage all of those people.
Yeah, I feel like we have a pretty significant team. So we usually do cap it at 30 attendees because it is hands-on and we provide a lot of sort of one-on-one support and we answer all the questions. Like we want it to be interactive. So as you sort of imply, the larger the number of people we have, the harder that gets. We might have capped one or two at 40. But generally we have around 30, I think. And even with that, we're constantly adjusting the number of helpers. I feel like we have 2 instructors, me and sort of one other host, and then we'll have someone always scribing, putting stuff into Slack, and then we usually have like anywhere from 2 to 4 additional helpers. So it is a fairly large team. We do pull helpers outside of our core facility. Sometimes we go to our sequencing core, even others on campus, to help sort of with that management. But we do want to provide that type of, like I said, personalized support. And so we do have a lot of helpers for the number of attendees.
well, it makes sense, people pay.
Great.
Well, let's try to get to Elliot's question.
Okay, so Elliot has a question from Marci. He writes, you offer a course on computational reproducibility. Fred mentioned data management and sharing instruction. Do you also try to introduce data management and sharing principles in your consultations or courses?
That is a great question. The reproducible computing one is our newest workshop, so we've only done that once, so I'm trying to remember exactly what we got through. So we talk about some of that stuff, but not, I think, sort of as a higher level and sort of as a extra. We got lots of extra resources that we include in the workshop stuff, so we don't spend a lot of time on that per se, unless someone asks a question on it, so it's not a large part of it, but I feel like we do mention it, and certainly in the reproducible computing, we do go into why it's important to manage your data and make sure that your data is reproducible. So I think in that workshop, we do cover it a little bit more, and things like containerization and workflow management is all sort of part of that. But I don't think the other workshops per se go into a lot of detail about that.
And if I may add another question. So in that computational reproducibility, you mentioned you give an introduction to containerization, or do you actually have a portion where you teach how to access that?
Yep, so that is one of the modules that is covered during the workshop.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's something I'm trying to get into.
And all of our lesson plans are available if you go to the webpage, and if anyone wants it, you can reach out to me. I can send that to you. We do put the lesson plans from the most recent workshop after the fact. We link to those. So those are out there and available to people if you want to take them and use them and modify them.
I will definitely connect with you on that. There is another question from Mengli.
There is, let me just say it, we're going to lose some folks because it's just about the top of the hour. So I just want to point out in the chat, we have a link to a certificate of completion if you would like to download that for your professional development purposes. And when you leave the webinar, you will get a link to an evaluation form. So please fill that out. So just want to let you know that, but I'll give Marci a chance to answer our final question here about core capacity. Basically, are you saturated? Like, are you meeting all the needs? What do you think?
It's a very tricky question. There are times when we're saturated and overwhelmed, and then there are other times where we are much less saturated. I wish projects came in evenly dispersed across the year, and it very much does not. So there are times when we were just overwhelmed. Right now happens to be one of those. And other times where I'm like, oh, I can't wait for us to get another project. So it's a good question, and it's very hard because more and more with the way bioinformatics analysis is moving with single cell and spatial analysis, the projects are also much more complex and they last a lot longer. So I'm finding that projects are spanning months sometimes because you also have to have a lot of back and forth with researchers to get their input. They have to be more involved. And so that also makes it a little bit more challenging to figure out how much work we have and how many projects are coming in. So that's not a direct answer to that question, but I would say that sort of, we're always looking for more projects, and the core does works for external customers. We're not just limited to University of Michigan too. So if you're looking, put a little plug in there for them, feel free to reach out to us, but we are always looking for more projects.
Thank you so much. Thank you to both of you for wonderful presentations. Really interesting.
And I guess that's all we have time for today. It was beautiful. I loved it. Yes, please come again next Friday for the next presentation, next session on how we can provide and enhance services of bioinformatics in minorities universities. So yeah, I look forward to hear from you all next week.
See you next week.
See you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. This video was produced by the network of the National Library of Medicine. Select the circular channel icon to subscribe to our channel, or select a video thumbnail to watch another video from the channel.